Live from the studios of WSOU, the loudest rock at Seton Hall University, South Orange, New Jersey. Welcome to Thank God It's Monday. I'm Brother Gregory Cellini from the class of '85, and it's my great pleasure once again to be back live with you today. Before I introduce our very special guest, I want to say hello to Mom and other family members who may be listening. Happy feast day, Mom, of Santa Lucia, to you and to all the other Lucias on this Monday, December 13th. I also want to say thanks to the Franciscan Brothers of Brooklyn housemates living in Bay Ridge, our wonderful coordinator Robert, and our other brothers living there. My life as a brother just continues to be an incredible learning and nourishing experience, and if you want any information about the Franciscan Brothers of Brooklyn, just email me, please, at greglcellini@yahoo.com. That's GREGLCELLINI@yahoo.com. Listeners, enough about me, because this show is all about you. The purpose of Thank God It's Monday is to inspire our listeners to take personal responsibility for your professional satisfaction. We want to provide you hope and healing in these turbulent times and motivate you to search deep inside yourself in the quest for fulfillment. Alicia Keys says it perfectly in our opening song, "There's nothing you can't do." As always, listeners, it's really up to you as to how to use the information we provide and to take full accountability for the decisions you make and the resulting outcomes. Now, since we're live today, you have instant access to us. You can call Jason on the other side of the glass at 973-761-WSOU. That's 973-761-9768. Now, one of the goals of Thank God It's Monday is to introduce role models of people who take those bold steps to live our Seton Hall motto of hazards ed forward, advance despite difficulties. And this is why I'm elated that Dr. Irina Ellison, assistant professor in the Biology and Health Promotion Department at St. Francis College, the small college of big dreams in Brooklyn Heights, New York, has phoned into our studios to talk about smoking. Welcome, Irina.
Welcome. Hi, how are you?
Very, very good. It's a beautiful sunny day down here in South Orange, and please share with our listeners where you're calling from.
Hi, yes, I'm calling from northern Westchester, where there's a very light but beautiful blanket of snow on the ground.
Ah, that sounds so beautiful as well, and thank you so much for getting up extra early to grace our Thank God It's Monday airwaves today.
My pleasure.
Before we get into this topic, which is really so important, this smoking and smoking in the workplace, because with New Year's right around the corner, and I think some of our listeners having a New Year's resolution maybe to stop smoking. But before we get into this, just share with us, please, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a native New Yorker, and for as long as I can remember, I've had an interest in science and medicine, and I pursued that interest by getting a degree in biology at Vassar College. And when I was at Vassar, I had to make a really important decision. Did I want to go to medical school, or did I want to pursue research and try and develop strategies to heal people in new ways? And what I decided was I really wanted to do both. So I ended up pursuing a PhD in pathology, which is the study of diseases at New York Medical College. And so I was able to really get the best of both worlds and pursue my interest in diseases, but also in trying to find new ways to prevent and heal people.
Now, I'm very curious, with your wonderful background, what motivated you to get involved specifically with smoking?
I was really interested in my first lab experience in graduate school to explore disease prevention, and I was really exposed to public health as a field, and that really prompted my interest. My dissertation research is in smoking and looking at how smoking affects different races differently, and so that really started my interest in smoking.
I have the great pleasure at St. Francis College to be a colleague of yours, and really got to know you through the recent Great American Smokeout. Share with our listeners, please, a little bit about this great event which we recently worked on.
Sure. The Great American Smokeout is a 24-hour challenge for smokers to quit in the hopes of promoting long-term cessation. Basically, if you can get the smokers to quit for 24 hours, maybe they will have the tools then to continue with their pursuit of quitting. At our Smokeout this year, we were fortunate enough to have New York City Council member Dale Brewer, who talked to us about expansion of the Clean Air Act, which is basically that what they're seeking to do is to stop smoking at beaches and parks, and hopefully that'll be instituted already by next summer.
Now, if I understand correctly, there are some cities or towns, maybe not New York, that either have no smoking at beaches or parks, but nobody has them at both, if I perceive correctly.
Right, that's correct. So
And
New York would be the first.
Lauding the efforts of New York to be right on the forefront here. I really have to ask you the next question because I think there is a sort of a misnomer about what the answer is, and I've been tremendously enlightened since working on the Great American Smokeout. Just how harmful is smoking to the smoker, and is there an acceptable or social level of smoking?
Okay. Well, smoking is the leading preventable cause of death in the U.S. and worldwide.
Whoa.
And there is no safe level. So there's been a lot of research about this. The Surgeon General first put out his official statement in the late 50s and has put out actually 30 statements since then regarding smoking and the harmful effects, and there is definitely no safe level of smoking. And there's also no safe level of secondhand smoke, which is an important factor to those of us who don't smoke. The good news is that once you quit, though, the harmful effects start to reverse very, very quickly. And basically it's an immediate effect that once you stop smoking, you start to reap the benefits of being a non-smoker virtually instantaneously.
So do I perceive, let's say one of our listeners is looking to quit, they do make an effort starting on January 1st, 2011 to do that. Do I perceive, Irina, that there would be a pretty immediate effect on a positive effect or benefits for them?
Absolutely. Basically 20 minutes after your last cigarette, your heart rate starts to drop, your blood pressure starts to drop. About 12 hours after quitting, your carbon monoxide levels drop virtually to normal of a non-smoker. And then over time, there will be additional changes. About 2 weeks to 3 months, your circulation improves, your lung function increases. A couple of months after that, you should start to regain full lung function. You'll be able to breathe a little more easily. Again, reduce your risk of infections. And then really, the more lasting effects, your risks for cancer, your risk for serious cardiovascular diseases like heart attacks, take a little bit longer, but the sooner you stop smoking, certainly the sooner those effects will come into play.
Thank you for sharing those very, very powerful pieces of information, because I'm really hoping that for our listeners who may have a strong desire to quit, that it's this show that can give them the inspiration to do so in 2011. You mentioned before about secondhand smoke, and I know secondhand smoke is something that, for better or worse, kind of bothers me for a lot of reasons, but share with us, please, from a biology and medical standpoint, Doctor, what are the effects of secondhand smoke?
Okay. Well, the effects of secondhand smoke are unfortunately virtually the same as the effects of primary smoke. Secondhand smoke is categorized as a Class A carcinogen, which means that it is known to cause cancer in humans. And it's not simply the cancer that it's causing, because cancer generally takes a long time to develop. So particularly for exposures in younger children, cancer wouldn't be a huge risk factor immediately. Of course, over time that would develop. But there are other things that would cause immediate effects, things like asthma attacks, heart attacks. Secondhand smoke is known to be the impetus to start heart attacks in some people. You could be walking down the street, following a smoker, you inhale the secondhand smoke, and that can be enough of a trigger to start a heart attack. It can decrease your ability to conceive by being exposed to secondhand smoke. And it's particularly harmful to infants and children. It can cause a lot of different effects, things like ear infections. It can cause sudden infant death syndrome. It can cause respiratory infections of all kinds, asthma attacks, again, as I mentioned, and just generally decrease the lung function of children and infants.
I think the light bulb just went on thanks to you, Doctor, because I remember my aunt and uncle many, many years ago. My aunt had a heart attack and a serious operation. And one of the things the doctor had told her was that she should not be around anyone who smoked. And my uncle at the time was smoking. And now I understand why just being in a room with smoking, with someone who smoked, could literally have killed her via another heart attack.
Right. And unfortunately, it's not simply just being in a room with somebody. It's also being outside with somebody. So the research supports that if you're within about 3 feet of a smoker, you're inhaling that secondhand smoke, even if you are outside. And that's, I think, really the reasoning behind the expansion of the Clean Air Act to extend it into parks and beaches, because you don't necessarily have to be in a confined, enclosed environment with somebody. You can really just be sitting next to somebody on a park bench or sitting next to somebody on the beach who's smoking, and you can also get those harmful effects.
Thank you for adding that, because I know I was under the impression that if someone was sort of outside, quote unquote, if you will, that the harmful effects would have gone away. But no, that's not the case. So
No.
these are things we all have to keep in mind. One more question, if I may, which is really in the forefront of my mind and heart. We have just spent the last 5 to 8 minutes talking about all these negative aspects of smoking. Goodness gracious, why do people start smoking if all these negative aspects are known?
Well, about 80% or more of smokers begin before the age of 18. So 15,
Really?
16, 17, that's really the key ages for when smokers begin. So if you think about what's going on in a 15, 16, 17-year-old, these are very impressionable young adults. And unfortunately, the symbols of cigarettes, although the education is out there that cigarettes are harmful, and we kind of all know that in the back of our minds, the symbol of the cigarette as being rebellious and being a sign of kind of personal freedom, that's still, I think that's still prevalent in children of that age group. Unfortunately, Big Tobacco did a very good job of kind of enforcing that people have a right to smoke and that it's an American freedom to be a smoker.
Like so many other things, it really is all in the marketing. And as you say, Big Tobacco has done an incredible job of doing that now for many, many decades.
Right.
Listeners, for anyone who's just tuned in, you're listening to Thank God It's Monday, our weekly talk show about the workplace here on WSOU, the loudest rock, Seton Hall University. I'm Brother Gregory Cellini from the class of '85, but much more important than me today, our very, very special guest calling in all the way from the Westchester area, Dr. Irina Ellison, the assistant professor in biology and health promotion department at St. Francis College, a very, very valued colleague of mine, has called in to talk about smoking. And what I'd like to do now is shift gears a little bit, because this ties into some of the work we did at the Great American Smokeout. How does a smoker know whether his or her smoking is social or really now has gone beyond social and has become an addiction?
Right. Well, I want to begin just by saying that, again, there's no safe amount of smoking.
Thank you.
And there's no safe level of secondhand smoke either. So any smoking that a person does or any secondhand smoke that a person receives is going to impact their health negatively. Now, smoking is often kind of hand in hand with drinking, and people have the impression that social drinking is okay, and for the most part, having a drink with a friend does not have a negative health impact. Social smoking, even having just one cigarette, does have a negative health impact, and not only does it have that negative health impact on the individual who's smoking, but whoever that person is talking to in that social setting. So social drinking and social smoking are really two very, very different things. And I think if we can shift the mentality behind social smoking and kind of expand it to really see it for what it is, that you are harming other individuals. drunk driving is not seen as an acceptable situation.
Sure.
Someone is drinking and they're going out and they are potentially harming other individuals. And smoking is really much more analogous to drunk driving than it is to drinking. You're going out and you're not just impacting yourself, you're impacting the health of others.
That is so enlightening and really debunks the myth that having a cigarette or two is okay and it's not harming anyone else.
Right, and the other big problem with social smoking is that the contents of a cigarette, the nicotine in the cigarette, is so addictive, and by starting to have those first few cigarettes, you can very, very easily get hooked. And certainly people have addictions to drinking as well, but the strength of the drug is much stronger in a cigarette than it is in alcohol.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because several of the students I spoke with on the Great American Smokeout had said their smoking had begun way beyond social and it become an addiction. And that's why, thank God, that you were there to really give them a lot of very, very good advice. I'd be very interested, Doctor, how organizations, companies, universities, places of work have changed their view about smoking in the workplace in maybe the last 20 to 30 years.
Sure. Well, San Francisco kind of led the way in terms of putting laws in place about smoking restrictions in the workplace. About 30 years ago, a little less than 30 years ago, San Francisco really was the first city to pass any laws about that. And then slowly but surely, these laws expanded to other states and other situations. So about 20 years ago, there was a ban on smoking on interstate buses and domestic flights of 6 hours or less, but it's really taken a very long time to kind of catch up with no smoking entirely in the workplace in other cities. So it's only been really in the past 7 years or so that New York State has banned smoking in all indoor workplaces, and I'm sure everyone remembers this as being the ban on smoking in bars, because that was kind of the big situation.
Sure.
But it was really a law to help protect non-smokers and protect people against the harmful effects of secondhand smoke by banning smoking in all indoor workplaces.
I remember very vividly one of the greatest days of my life in the workplace, July 1, 1991, when the pharmaceutical company I worked for went smokeless, and really improved things a great deal. Fortunately, being a pharma company, I think we were a little more on the cutting edge than many of the other organizations. But something that I've come to think about in my work in the Career Center at St. Francis College, is it true some organizations are less likely to hire people now who smoke?
Yes and no. So there is a ban. There's a ban on discriminating against any legal off-duty conduct. So smoking is legal, and because of that, you can't not hire someone because they are a smoker. However, companies get around this pretty easily, and it can impact an employee in other ways. So, for example, you can't discriminate by not hiring a smoker, but you can have laws in place for your company that say you can't take any smoking breaks. There's no smoking on the property, which is a New York State law. You can't come into the building with any detectable odor of smoke, which is a law that they have in New Hampshire, that employees, if they do go out on a lunch break and have a cigarette, basically they would need to change their clothing and use mouthwash during that time as well. Also, in New York State, although you can't discriminate against hiring someone, there's no law to say that you have to pay a smoker the same amount of money.
That's quite interesting.
Right. So you can get less wage. You can also get fewer benefits. That's completely legal, and they can charge you more for health insurance. So those are all legal aspects. Clearly, it's known that people who smoke have more sick days. People who are around smokers, by having the effects of secondhand smoke, are going to get sick more often. The image of smoking has changed over time, and it's not quite socially acceptable anymore. So it's something that companies think about. Do we want our image of our employees to be smokers or non-smokers? And again, when you're hiring someone, we are all just human, and so although the law says that you can't discriminate against people who are smokers because it is legal, I think, of course, at least even on a subconscious level, that's going to play into employers' minds.
You have just so beautifully given our smokers out there who are looking for work extra incentive to quit, because it sounds like their chances of finding work are going to be exponentially improved by not being a smoker these days than being a smoker. What once was looked at as cool now seems to be looked at as disdain.
Right, and it's also an issue of finance. Smoking is a very, very expensive habit, and not only are you getting hit with the cost of smoking, but now you might be getting hit with not getting paid as much because you're a smoker, or not getting as many benefits, or having your health insurance costs go up because you're a smoker. So you're kind of getting hit from both ends.
When you talk about having to pay more for benefits, that really, really can hurt someone in the pocketbook. No question about that.
Absolutely, and you're going to be probably using those benefits more because you're going to be getting sick more often.
Sure. It's a lose-lose for everyone. But I have to ask you this next question because I've heard both sides of the fence on this. Is it a myth that people who stop smoking will gain weight? Because I've heard one or two people I know who smoke who really have that fear.
Some people do gain weight, but it is not a cause of... Quitting smoking is not a cause of gaining weight. One of the things that happens when you smoke is that you lose your sense of taste. So smokers just tend not really to eat as much because they can't taste the food as well. Also, that really powerful drug in cigarettes, the nicotine, one of the effects of nicotine is that it satiates you. It makes you feel like you're full when you're not. So as long as you have a proper approach when you're quitting, and you take steps to realize what your body is going through and the withdrawal symptoms from the nicotine, you should be fine. You shouldn't gain any weight. People tend to, because they give up smoking, because they give up that habit of having something in their hands, they of course reach for something else they can put in their hands, chips or other kind of snack foods, and that's how they end up gaining weight. If they reach for healthier snacks, carrots, celery, something like that, a glass of water, that's a really great way to not only increase your health by taking in a lot of stuff that's good for you, vegetables, and clearing out your system with water, but also to prevent that excessive weight gain.
I believe that when you and I were speaking in preparation for today, you mentioned a real success story in this area. Would you be so kind to share that with our listeners, please?
Absolutely. I had a friend who was very overweight and a smoker, just kind of an overall picture of bad health. And so this friend decided that they wanted to make a change. And so the approach was that every time they thought of having a cigarette, they would go for a walk. And over time, basically it was a whole body transformation. My friend was able to lose a lot of weight and was able to quit smoking.
Oh, what a win-win there.
Right.
Not only quitting the smoking, but getting on the trails and instead of gaining weight, losing a lot of weight.
Yep.
Ah, that's very motivational for our listeners and anyone who's in that same position. The big question that we built up to, Doctor, if a smoker, one of our listeners, wants to make a resolution to quit in 2011, how would you suggest they begin to do such?
I think they really need to evaluate where they are in terms of quitting. So I'm sure there are people who are listening who are smokers and maybe not quite ready to take that plunge into quitting, but there are steps you can take even before that. So you can think about quitting. Start to gather some resources. There are a lot of resources out there to help you develop a plan to quit. Start to modify your smoking risk. And then really the next step after that is to decide to quit. Set the quit date. So as you mentioned, January 1st, great time to make resolutions and to decide to have that as a definitive quit date. Once you actually set your quit date, then the next step is really important to tell people that you're doing it. Don't keep it a secret. Let your friends, let your family know that you are quitting, and they will be very supportive of you. take advantage of the support options available to you. There are several quit lines that are available. There's a 1-866 New York Quits, which is the New York quit line. There's 1-800-ACS-2345, which is the American Cancer Society quit line, and 1-800-QUIT-NOW, which is a federal quit line. So there are a lot of free options that you can use to help you. Smoking is a really hard addiction to break, and you need to reach out and to use the resources available to you. There are medications that are available, things like nicotine patches and gum that can help you with your withdrawal symptoms. There are also prescription medications, so it might be important to talk to your doctor about some of the steps that you would want to take to quit smoking.
In just
one
about
of the other,
I'm sorry, Doctor. Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say one of the other really important things is to clean everything out. Anything that smells like smoke, cigarettes, ashtrays, get rid of all of it. Clean all your clothing, clean your furniture, clean your rugs, and then avoid situations that are where you're going to be exposed to smoking. There are so many public places. We're fortunate enough now that there are so many public places where smoking is not allowed. So you can really have a lot of social activities, a lot of engaging activities where you are not allowed to smoke. Put yourself in those activities and you're able to still maintain social options, but in a smoke-free environment.
Dr. Irina Ellison, the Assistant Professor in Biology and Health Promotion Department at St. Francis College, Brooklyn Heights, New York. Thank you so much for gracing the airwaves of WSOU, and thank God it's Monday today. You've given me inspiration to be much more cognizant of people who do smoke and to try to help support them as we do start a new year. And I know for our listeners who are smokers, you've given them great incentive to move beyond that in the year 2011. So many thanks again for all your wonderful work, and keep up your great efforts, certainly.
Thank you.
Listeners, that's about all the time we have today. As always, I'm Brother Gregory Cellini, and my hope and prayer is that when you wake up on Monday morning, you'll say, thank God, it's Monday. And for some additional graces, here's our very beloved Professor Stan.
Most Holy Virgin, Mother of God, Mother of all nations, whose image of Tzel's Jehovah shrine bears scars by hostile hands, through your intercession obtained from your divine Son peace through truth and justice for the beleaguered people of the world. Queen of Peace, replace their despair by hope, dissension by love, darkness by the light of Christ. Despise not our petition, O Queen of the universe, but in your mercy keep under your protection their heritage of the rights of man and true freedom. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary, amen. Our Lady of Jehovah, please pray for us.